Morning. I want to welcome in our first guest. She is a former county administrator, a prolific author, and she'll fill in the number, how many umpteen books that she's now written in her retirement. Miss Deborah Hammond, good morning to you.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
What is the number of books you've popped out now?
28 is in edits.
28. Mm-hmm. That is amazing. What is the 28th called?
Death in a Perfect Village.
Death in a Perfect Village.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Set in Scotland.
And she started this when she left the county administration, county government in 2013?
2014.
2014, yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's over 2 a year.
Yeah.
Hey, good for you.
Thank you.
Keep him busy. You worked for Mr. Stubblefield. He worked for
indeed.
you.
No, worked with. We worked with. Yeah, yeah.
He worked for you sometimes, he says.
Exactly right, most of the time.
Yeah, as the county administrator when Bill was the president of the county Board of County Commissioners as well. You also worked with Howard Strauss, who passed away, we understand, recently, Deborah.
I did indeed, and it was not until last week when Mr. Ass and I were talking about the topic we're going to be speaking of today that I discovered that had taken place and was so very saddened by it because for those of us who were fortunate enough to work with Howard, he was a force of nature. And he always said, I only want one term because I want to do it right. And I do not want to have the concern of, well, what will people say about this or that or what have you? I just want to do it the right way. And he most definitely did.
What were his years as commissioner?
Howard was elected in 2000 and took office in 2001. And interestingly enough, I was thinking after talking with Mr. Ass, just, you try to make a capsule of somebody's legacy and how challenging that is. But for those who are not aware or perhaps were not here in Berkeley County during those years, Howard provided the leadership that resulted in the purchase of the former Blue Ridge Outlet Center, which then, of course, made it possible for us to move governmental offices to what is now called the Dunn Building. It was the Dunn Building when it was a mill. And the Berkeley Building then became the Berkeley County Judicial Center. In addition to that, as if that alone would not have been enough to secure someone's legacy, we also doubled the size of animal control during those years. And his last action from a facility standpoint was to oversee the purchase of what was then referred to as the Kimco property, where the Berkeley County Law Enforcement Center and Day Reporting Center are now located. So we use that term frequently, that we stand on the shoulders of those who came before us. By the purchase of that Kimco property, subsequent county commissions were then able to do the Law Enforcement Center and now the Day Reporting Center. So it's always building upon the legacy of others. And Howard's legacy was a very, very strong one. But not just in the facilities area. There are those who may not know that he was instrumental in the Berkeley County Development Authority securing the Criswell Farm, which then became the landing place in later years for Procter & Gamble. So again, standing on the shoulders, making decisions and making actions that others can then benefit from down the road.
In fact, the Criswell property was not going to happen. They ran into a dead end, and Howard volunteered to get involved and made it happen. He used his personal friendship to make it happen. And that was, without that property, the Development Authority would not have the success it's had for the last 20 years.
Absolutely. And I remember so very well when the property was surveyed, we discovered that there were actually about 30 or so more acres in the property than Mr. Criswell had even been aware of. And so, of course, we're assuming, we're going to have to renegotiate the price. And his statement was, the price is the price. We go forward.
Handshake contracts, right? Yeah. I had the pleasure of interviewing Howard several times in the mid to late 90s when I was hosting the show across town. He was quite a character. Fun interview, really a fun guy to interview.
Yes.
But he and Commissioner Jim Smith did not see eye to eye on many issues. You worked with both, did you not?
I did indeed. Yes.
Yeah, and I presume that you got along with both independently.
I did
Because
indeed.
Jim was a great fellow himself, but for whatever those two it didn't work.
Well, I always said that I worked with people of all political stripes, which was the case. And, it was about the work. It wasn't about the party.
Very good. Well, during those times, we understand MS4 became a thing. This is not a street gang. This is a different designation.
Let me give you the reason. I had to look it up earlier. We used the term MS4, forgot
Yes.
what it means. Municipal Separate Stormwater Sewer Systems.
And this is what has led ultimately to something people derisively call the rain
Rain
tax.
tax, exactly.
Yes. So you were there at the time this was being discussed and then implemented, and the reasons why it was implemented and why Berkeley County ultimately decided to become a part of MS4.
I was indeed. We were approached by West Virginia DEP, as were other growth communities, because the emphasis was on growth.
What year was this?
This would have been 2005, 2006. This was before the Great Recession, when we were in that first burst of activity that came our way. And the growth communities were focused on, because of course there were several different factors. First of all, we are within that Chesapeake Bay watershed. So what was happening at the federal level is that all of the states that contributed to that the Chesapeake Bay watershed were being asked to look at their water quality. And of course, you had Virginia in that, you had Maryland, you have a piece of West Virginia because of our watershed connectivity, and then Pennsylvania, which of course has always been the big bugaboo with the Susquehanna. So there was that piece. There was the growth piece, and what was already before us and what was being projected was going to come down the road, which of course here we are 20 some years later, and we've definitely seen the fruition of that. So we were approached.
Excuse me, when you say you were approached, does that mean you were threatened with enforcement action, or was this to do a study?
We were approached. It was not a threat.
Okay.
It was not action. We were approached.
Okay.
And what was used as the method of that approach was, because we were a growth community and because we had the development community that was at the time presenting their plans to Berkeley County Planning and Berkeley County Engineering, then when it came to the stormwater piece, plans were being sent to Charleston for DEP approval. So the thought that Howard put forth was we needed to create a situation where we had a one-stop shop. And of course, I'm going back to what I mentioned about the Dunn building. We could literally create a one-stop shop, because someone could come to the second floor of the Dunn building at the time, stop at the planning department. The environmental health was across the hallway, present plans there, go to engineering, present plans there, and we then brought on through this process an engineer that could review the stormwater management plans, and also as the stormwater management facilities were being built, could review to make sure that they were in compliance. So that was kind of the carrot and the stick, that we can create this opportunity for the development community, but will also strengthen stormwater management regulations as part of that. So as we're going through the process and as we were going through the permit, there were requirements that we had to tighten stormwater management. And, for those of us who've lived here for a number of years, we know every spring and fall, there were areas of the county that regularly flooded because, of course, the stormwater management was non-existent in some of those developments.
Especially Inwood was one that have major flooding every year.
Absolutely.
As was Berkeley Station Road, also major flooding there
Right.
and other places.
So, in addition to this approach from DEP, there was the fact, just as Mr. Stubblefield has mentioned, the reoccurring flooding areas. We had subdivisions that would be coming to commission meetings spring and fall. You have to do something. We have this flooding. You have to do something. And of course, that would require retrofitting of subdivisions, which was a very costly proposition. But what we could look at was, how do we address this in the future in the development area or time period that we found ourselves, and also into the future, 10, 20, 30 years into the future? How do we address this to try to prevent this from happening countywide? So the decision was made that we would pursue the MS4 permit.
As a commission, the decision was made?
This was a commission decision.
What
That's
is it,
correct.
a 3-0 vote?
It was a 3-0 vote.
Oh, excuse me. I used to be in the hazardous waste business. So when I hear stormwater management, I don't think flood prevention. I think hazardous waste management. So when in this context, you talk about stormwater during the rain season, we had flooding, and Bill talks about flooding in Inwood, so we're trying to figure out a way to get that. That's one consideration. Is that what you're talking about here, or are you talking about preventing the flow of hazardous materials into where Chesapeake Bay, I guess, from here?
No hazardous materials were part of this discussion.
So this is not about the runoff and all
This
of
is
that.
totally about, it is about runoff, but it is about stormwater runoff. And so what I mean by that is, when you have, without getting too technical, when you have a stormwater management facility, it is designed so that the water slowly goes into the ground without being that first flush, which is what has all of the chemicals, etc. So you design it so that you have slow absorption rather than runoff into roads or into adjacent subdivisions. That's how it's designed. So in order to accomplish that, as I mentioned, we had to strengthen the stormwater management regulations. That was part of the piece to actually work through the process of the permit.
And do you recall the 3 commissioners at the time?
This would have been Mr. Strauss, Mr. Burkhart, and Mr. Teufel, I believe.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, Mr. Teufel replaced Mr. Wright.
Bill?
Okay. Yeah. So initially it was to prevent the flooding or to address the flooding. And then we went, as memory serves, Deborah, went for 5, 6, 7 years with just kind of benign effect. We were not getting any real guidance or pressure from the state, from DEP at all. And then probably 2012, 2013, the state came in and said, you've got to start paying something. And then that's when we went to the sewer district, came to the county and said that they would like to, they were willing to manage the stormwater management. At one time, the county felt they would have a separate unit to manage it, but the sewer district said they wished to do it. And then went into a period of trying to find the best way to pay for the stormwater management, and then that kind of moved up to 2016, 2017, that period of time where the counties, where the commissioners were looking for some way to pay for it.
What were they paying for, Bill?
They were paying for the management and the execution. I don't really know, John. Maybe Deborah can answer that question. That happened after I was on. Yeah.
Just one clarification on that, and that would be the timing piece.
Yes, please.
What took place was, we had, as I said, the review of the plans that were taking place. DEP then said at a later time that they wanted not just the review of the plans, they wanted the stormwater management facilities to be inspected and reviewed on a yearly basis.
And what did they? When did DEP say that? What did they get?
This was actually post my tenure. That's why I'm saying from a date standpoint that was post my tenure, because before my retirement, the management of this moved to the sewer district, as you had mentioned. And then they were going to be responsible for this maintenance and inspection piece. So that was later down the road. And also, from my understanding, again, this is just my review of what occurred in the media. I don't have specific details. The thought process was there has to be a revenue stream in order to pay for the individuals who are going to be carrying out those functions. And that's when the issue of fees began to surface.
You know, and the fees are not that much. Now in the city, quite a bit. But in the county, as we heard the other day, $41, $42. But the label with the fees, I think, is an inflammatory part of this equation. The so-called rain tax. And if the fees were $500 or $600, it'd be one thing. $41 is not a lot of money. But it's the image that's behind it. I think the county would be well served to find a way that they could absorb that themselves, maybe increasing the levy amount, whatever the case may be, but some way to take away the image of this rain tax, because that's going to be biting the county for times in perpetuity. Well,
stormwater is rain. I mean, it's. I understand it's kind of it's an inflammatory title, but it's. I want to go back to a stormwater management facility. Mm-hmm. Are those the stormwater management ponds that you see in neighborhoods?
That is correct.
Okay, so what is the plan for the long-term liability? We had this where I lived in Fairfax before I moved here. There was an issue. What happens with these, the runoff from roadways, and so you've got the petroleum runoff, and you got whatever spilled on the roadways. All that was diluted, and then ultimately accumulated in the rivers and streams and down into the Chesapeake Bay, and that's what we're trying to prevent. But they don't go away. So what happens is all of those pollutants end up gathering in these ponds, and the ponds, as you say, it's a slow filter. Well, those slow filters get burdened over time with these hazardous materials that ultimately have to be cleaned out. Otherwise, they become hazardous materials pits. So is there a plan ultimately to manage these and clean these out? I mean, what is the long-term liability, financial liability to handle these?
Again, that is an answer that you would need to pose to my successors.
Okay, that's fair.
Because that is
not an issue. You're a mystery writer now. You're not that.
That is not an issue. That is not an issue that we dealt with.
Have you buried anybody in any of these pits in your books, Deborah?
Absolutely not.
But
if
I could very quickly,
sure.
A lot of this falls back to the HOVs and the HOAs rather. I'm sorry, the HOAs, and the HOAs rarely have enough in the bank account to address this problem. So it is a major problem.
It is a big problem.
Yeah, so how they're going to resolve it, I'd be curious.
Yeah, this is the thing. I'm the president of our HOA where I live, and
Maryland is even tougher.
Yes, because Maryland a couple of years ago put in regulations for HOAs that you have to show a fiscal plan to be solvent into the future for these types of repairs. So you have to get a study done. The study costs $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, $9,000, depending on who does it. And they tell you, here's your stormwater pit, and here's what you have to do every so many years to dredge it, and every so many years you got to do this, and here's the expected cost for that. So you have to make sure you account for that money so many years into the future as well in your reserves, and it's very regulated. And if you're in an HOA that doesn't have money set aside and you are facing one of these repairs, who picks up the tab on that? Does that end up going back to the state? As I understand it, there's laws right now that prevent that from happening. But somebody's got to pick up the tab on it.
Absolutely.
Right.
As with all things. There was also a point that Mr. Stubblefield made, which referenced the city. And I think it's important to note, because I think people get very, very confused about this fact. The city has a separate permit. The city has separate fee structure. So, you sometimes will see the journal junctions and people complaining to the county, well, why did you do this to the city? Well, totally separate. Two separate governments, two separate policies, two separate fees. So just so everyone understands that the county commission does not impose fees in the city of Martinsburg.
And I understand those city fees are each quarter is about the same as what the annual fee for the county is. The other big complaint, Deborah, is that I guess Procter and Gamble pays the same fee in the county as a resident with a couple acres or whatever pays, and they feel that's very unjust. Any idea why it was set up that way?
Again, that's a policy decision
That's
for my
interesting.
successors.
Because businesses are regulated differently than individuals are. I mean, entirely different. As I haven't studied these regulations in 15 years,
Sure.
but it's entirely legal for residents to throw paint thinner into their backyard. There's no,
Is it really?
they can't be fined for that because it's their house. It's $25,000 a day if a business does that. So,
But the county has differentiated between businesses and residentials in several areas. The fire fee being one.
Right.
But if you differentiate it here, you think of Procter and Gamble, but you forget about all these small mom and pops that have impervious surfaces. That would be if the differential was very much, you'd be putting a real financial burden on these mom and pop industries. I think it's, as I alluded a second ago, there are two issues here. The issue is the dollar amount. The other issue is the image that's been portrayed. And people, I think, are fighting back or having more difficulty with the image of a so-called rain tax than they are with the $41 a year they're paying.
Well,
As someone just said on our Facebook, if it's $1 a year, it'd be too much, and I think that's true because of the way this has been projected and portrayed.
Deborah, good to see you again.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your knowledge on this.
Absolutely.
and the name of your book again
Thrilled
is?
to. Death in a Perfect Village.
It will be released when?
It will be released this fall.
Before she goes, very quickly.
5 seconds.
Yeah, the county won 3 or 4 County of the Year awards, at least while I was there. And it was not the commissioners, it was Deborah Hammond. Deborah Hammond was the driver. She was one of the most efficient administrators you can imagine.
And on that note, we thank you again, Deborah.